From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.
Good day, this is Dateline Malacañang. Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. announced the expansion of fuel subsidy distribution to more public utility vehicle or PUV operators nationwide as part of government efforts to cushion the impact of rising oil prices. Speaking at the Parañaque Integrated Terminal Exchange or PITX, President Marcos said program or the subsidy program initially rolled out to bus operators in Metro Manila will now cover additional PUV sectors across the country. Each bus unit will receive 10,000 pesos in the fuel assistance. He added that the government is studying the wider use of digital payment systems to speed up the release of subsidies. He noted that traditional modes such as cash and checks remain available for beneficiaries who prefer them. President Marcos also called for cooperation from transport operators and drivers to ensure the smooth implementation of the program. The fuel subsidy is part of the administration's broader measures to mitigate the effects of global oil price volatility amid tensions in the Middle East.
Nandito ako para tiyakin na yung aming ginagawa na fuel subsidy ay maayos kasi mag-start tayo today. Pero hindi lamang dito sa Metro Manila pero all over the country na ito. So making sure na yung sistema ay maging maayos. So we are now providing 10,000 subsidy for each bus unit. So with the cooperation ako malakas ang loob ko sabihin na pagka basta't nagtutulungan tayo yung private sector at saka yung kayong mga operator at saka kami in government sana maging hindi na umala yung pakiramdam ng ating riding public yun ang ating mga siniservisyohan na matiyak natin na maging maayos ang kanilang pagbiyahe.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has declared a state of national emergency to address potential disruption in fuel supply and stabilize the country's energy sector. Under Executive Order or EO 110 signed on Tuesday, President Marcos cited the escalating tensions in the Middle East as a key factor threatening global oil production and transportation, which could affect the Philippines as a net importer of petroleum products. Disruptions in critical supply routes, including the Strait of Hormuz, may constrain global fuel supply and trigger price volatility, posing risks to the country's energy security, according to EO 110. President Marcos stressed the need to declare a state of national emergency or national energy emergency to enable the government through the Department of Energy or DOE and other concerned agencies to implement coordinated measures to ensure stable and adequate energy supply while mitigating the impact on the economy. EO 110 orders the adoption of the Unified Package for Livelihoods, Industry, Food, and Transport, or UPLIFT, to safeguard national interest. The framework aims to ensure the availability of domestic energy supply, uninterrupted delivery of essential services, continuity of economic activity, and protection of vulnerable sectors. An uplift committee chaired by the President will oversee the implementation of the framework to mitigate the impact of the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. Committee members include the Executive Secretary and the Secretaries of the Department of Energy, Transportation, Social Welfare, Agriculture, Finance, Budget, and Economy. The committee is tasked to monitor the supply and distribution of fuel, food, medicines, and other essential goods, as well as ensure the continued operation of public transportation, utilities, and healthcare services. It will also coordinate efforts to maintain economic stability, streamline government processes for permits and licenses, and develop long-term strategies to reduce dependence on petroleum products. The DOE is directed to roll out energy supply management measures, including fuel optimization plans, load adjustments, and stricter enforcement of conservation efforts. EO 110 also seeks to accelerate the transition to renewable energy, promote the use of electric vehicles in public transport, and integrate clean energy solutions across key sectors such as agriculture and manufacturing. Public awareness encouraging energy efficiency and behavioral change will also be intensified. Other measures include the implementation of the fuel and energy optimization plans, as well as the adoption and enforcement of appropriate energy conservation measures. EO 110 orders coordination among relevant government agencies to ensure stable energy supply, appropriate action against hoarding, profiteering, and supply manipulation, exercise of powers authorized in times of energy, and adoption and implementation of a resource conservation and prioritization mechanism. Concerned agencies are directed to implement the necessary response measures to cushion the impact of the Middle East crisis on the country. Local government units, LGUs, are enjoined to support the national government by undertaking measures within their respective jurisdictions that support, facilitate, and complement the national policies and agency directives. EO 110 urges the private sector, civil society organizations, and other stakeholders to partner with government agencies and LGUs to provide logistical support, interventions, and critical services to affected sectors and vulnerable communities. The funding requirements for the implementation of the order will come from existing appropriations of the concerned agencies and other sources that may be identified by the Department of Budget and Management. The declaration is anchored on Republic Act 7638, or the Department of Energy Act, which authorizes the President to declare a state of emergency in cases of imminent energy supply shortages. It also draws authority from constitutional provisions granting the President control over executive departments and supervision over local governments.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. said that the grounding of airplanes is a distinct possibility on account of a potential jet fuel shortage linked to the ongoing crisis in the Middle East. In an exclusive interview with Bloomberg, President Marcos cited limitations in crude oil supply and slower jet fuel production as key concerns affecting airline operations. President Marcos also noted that some countries have imposed restrictions on refueling foreign aircraft, forcing airlines to carry sufficient fuel for return trips. The latest development, he said, is complicating international operations. Asked whether the recent developments could lead to planes being grounded, President Marcos said the country is hoping to avoid such a scenario but acknowledged the risk. Energy Secretary Sharon Green said the Philippines still has an adequate fuel supply until the second weekend of May. Green said the country has an average supply of about 45 days based on discussions with fuel companies, noting that the estimated remaining domestic supply is 53.14 days for gasoline, 45.82 days for diesel, 97.93 days for kerosene, 38.62 days for jet fuel, 61.49 days for fuel oil, and 23.51 days for liquefied petroleum gas. She added that the government has engaged with its counterparts from supplier countries such as South Korea, Japan, and China.
Dateline Malacañang.
A phased fuel contingency plan has been laid out to ensure stable supply and cushion the impact of the ongoing Middle East crisis, as senators also push for tax relief measures to ease rising fuel prices. Department of Energy DOE Undersecretary Felix William Fuentebella said the plan includes immediate, medium-term, and strategic actions to manage supply risks and price pressures. Presented during the Senate's proactive response and oversight for timely and effective crisis strategy or PROTECT committee hearing. The framework covers measures from 0 to 180 days, including intensified inventory monitoring, coordination with local governments, and expanded sourcing of fuel supply. Immediate steps include mobilizing the Philippine National Oil Company or PNOC to secure additional cargoes, engaging oil firms on staggered price adjustments, and enforcing measures against hoarding and profiteering. For the medium term, the DOE is exploring more suppliers and regional cooperation such as the ASEAN Petroleum Security Agreement or APSA, while long-term reforms focus on renewable energy development and reducing dependence on imported fuel. Alongside operational measures, the DOE proposed legislative actions, including the passage of an Emergency Petroleum Reserve Act, amendments to the Biofuels Act, and a supplemental budget for PNOC to sustain fuel procurement. During the hearing, Senator Bam Aquino underscored the need for immediate relief, particularly through possible tax adjustments to bring down pump prices. He said lawmakers are studying the possible reduction of value-added tax or VAT on fuel in addition to the excise tax suspension already approved by the Senate. Senator Lauren Legarda likewise backed a review of VAT on petroleum products, citing its significant impact on pump prices. Fuentebella said the DOE is coordinating with economic managers on possible tax adjustments while emphasizing the need for demand-side management and energy conservation. The PROTECT Committee is expected to consolidate policy measures and ensure a coordinated response as the government seeks to stabilize supply, manage prices, and mitigate the broader economic impact of the crisis.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Department of Economy, Planning and Development, or DepDev, proposed a package of short and long-term measures to cushion the impact of rising fuel prices and inflation amid the escalating conflict in the Middle East. DepDev Secretary Arsenio Balisacan presented to Senate the mitigation plan as the agency warned that inflation could breach the government's target range, with estimates reaching as high as 7.3% to 8.6% in 2026 under a worst-case scenario. Balisacan said immediate interventions include sustaining and expanding targeted fuel subsidies for vulnerable sectors such as transport and logistics, farmers and fisherfolk, and low-income households. He also recommended buffering sharp price volatility through staggered fuel price adjustments and the possible suspension of excise taxes when warranted. Balisacan further urged the promotion of energy conservation practices and closer monitoring of key goods and services to prevent hoarding, profiteering, and collusive activities. Over the medium to long term, Balisacan said there is a need to strengthen supply chains and fast-track infrastructure projects that promote active mobility to reduce dependence on fuel. He also pushed for the diversification of energy sources and wider adoption of renewable energy, alongside the development of an ecosystem for electric vehicles. The mitigation plan comes as DepDev flagged broader economic risks from the conflict, including potential spikes in fuel prices, higher inflation, and slower economic growth. Under its projections, gross domestic product growth could slow to between 3.5% and 4% in a worst-case scenario, while unemployment and poverty incidents may also rise. Balisacan warned that disruptions in overseas Filipino worker deployment could lead to significant declines in remittances, further weighing on domestic demand. Despite these risks, he said timely and targeted policy responses could help mitigate the impact and sustain economic resilience.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Department of Agriculture assured that mitigation measures are in place as the government prepares for the possible effects, including the worst-case scenario of the continuous fuel price hikes due to the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. During the hearing of the Senate Response and Oversight for Timely and Effective Crisis Strategy or PROTECT Committee, Agriculture Secretary Francisco Chu Laurel Jr. said efforts are underway to cushion the impact on Filipino farmers, fishers, and consumers. Although current prices of basic agricultural commodities remain at pre-conflict levels, the DA projected price spikes across goods should the global crude price hit $200 per barrel if tensions persist for up to 180 days. Chu Laurel said the agency has 6 steps to address the rising costs of fuel, fertilizer, freight, and logistic costs, among others. In terms of logistics, the DA highlighted investments in cold chain facilities, farm-to-market roads, and the need to talk with ports and transport groups. It is also eyeing diversifying its farm inputs and food sources. For the long-term strategy, the DA said the Philippines will advance agricultural resilience through farm consolidation, digitalization, and climate adaptation. According to the DA's worst-case scenario projection, the 1987 million metric tons or MT projected local palay unhusked rice production may slightly contract due to the high fertilizer prices. For the first semester of 2026, local rice output may drop by 11,868 metric tons and for the second semester by 112,522 metric tons. For retail prices, well-milled rice may incur a 49% jump in retail prices, equivalent to 67 pesos per kilogram from the 45 pesos per kilogram pre-conflict levels. Asked about a timeline for when the oil price surges might spill over to retail rice, Chu Laurel said effects may be felt around August. He, however, assured that prices may be tamed with adequate support for local food producers and flexibility to diversify sources of agricultural inputs and goods for the welfare of both farmers and consumers. The worst-case scenario projection also showed that chicken prices may increase to 324 pesos per kilogram from 200 pesos per kilogram, followed by pork, ham, and belly at 558.10 pesos per kilogram and 588 pesos per kilogram from 350 pesos per kilogram and 370 pesos per kilogram respectively. Chu Laurel said the local poultry industry has a bit of overproduction which helped tame prices. For pork stock inventory, he said there is sufficient volume in cold storage, but prices may be affected by exchange rates and freight costs. Overall, Chu Laurel said the agency must have the capacity to balance both the support to local farmers and consumers through diversification of importation sources and possible lowering of tariffs if needed.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Department of Agriculture announced the possible release of the 10 billion pesos Presidential Assistance for Farmers and Fisherfolk or PAF to registered farmers and fishers starting April 6. Agriculture Secretary Francisco Chu Laurel Jr. disclosed the timeline during the organizational meeting of the Senate Proactive Response and Oversight for Timely and Effective Crisis Strategy or PROTECT Committee amid surging fuel prices due to the ongoing tensions in the Middle East. Chu Laurel said they are eyeing to start start releasing the puff after the Holy Week following the commitment of the Department of Budget and Management. More than 4 million registered Filipino farmers and fishers are set to receive cash assistance to protect them from rising fuel costs. Majority of the beneficiaries are from the rice sector at 2.197 million, followed by 1.475 million corn producers, more than 102,000 sugar farmers, and about 399 fishers nationwide. The DA has earlier started the distribution of fuel subsidy to cushion the impact of rising fuel prices. The DA has a 150 million pesos approved budget for its fuel subsidy program for registered farmers and fishers. Each eligible farmer will receive 5,000 pesos and 3,000 pesos for qualified fishers. The DA is also eyeing to tap almost 100 million pesos in unused fuel subsidy funds from 2023 to 2025.
Dateline Malacañang.
Executive Secretary Ralph Recto said the proposed crisis committee ordered by Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. will consolidate and strengthen existing government measures to cushion the impact of the conflict in the Middle East. Recto noted that the interagency body is not a starting point but a mechanism to sustain and scale up the administration's ongoing response. He said the government immediately scrambled all resources to shield the nation from the immediate fallout, citing a range of interventions already in place. These include financial assistance, fuel subsidies for transport workers, and the repatriation of overseas Filipino workers or OFWs through government chartered flights. He added that energy conservation measures and cost-cutting initiatives have also been implemented. Recto said assistance will also be extended to farmers and fisherfolk to help cover fuel costs for their operations. He noted that the government has allocated tens of billions of pesos for aid to cushion vulnerable sectors from rising oil prices alongside ongoing efforts to secure fuel supply agreements. Recto said the creation of the crisis committee reflects the need for a more structured and sustained response as the situation evolves. He added that even if hostilities end soon, normalization will take time due to potential disruptions in global oil supply. The planned interagency body will define roles across agencies to ensure coordinated and efficient implementation of government measures, according to Recto.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Philippine National Police or PNP expressed readiness to assist the crisis committee being set up by the national government to respond to the adverse effects of the Middle East conflict in the country. Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. ordered the creation of a crisis committee to address the impact of rising fuel prices resulting from the escalating conflict in the Middle East. The situation in the Middle East has caused sharp increase in fuel costs, with diesel projected to go up by 16 pesos to 18 pesos per liter and gasoline by 9 pesos to 11 pesos per liter, potentially pushing diesel above 120 pesos per liter in some gas stations. The government has already started providing cash aid to affected groups, including tricycle drivers. Meanwhile, transport organizations have staged strikes to demand government intervention over the rising prices. PNP Chief General Jose Melencio Nartates Jr. underscored that it is not the first time the PNP has extended assistance during difficult times, citing the role of the police during the COVID-19 pandemic, when the police organization played a critical role in enforcing quarantine protocols, distributing relief, and supporting public safety measures.
Dateline Malacañang.
In other Malacañang news, Malacañang pledged to further accelerate the growth of the country's semiconductor and electronics or SME sector, recognizing it as a key driver of exports, employment, and overall economic expansion. Executive Secretary Ralph Recto convened a meeting with the Semiconductor and Electronics Industry Advisory Council or SEAIAC at Malacañang Palace, where he expressed the Marcos administration's commitment to fully implement the roadmap aimed at expanding the SME industry. Recto made the commitment, acknowledging that the sector plays a key role in the Philippines' economic progress, generating an estimated 3 trillion pesos in annual revenues and accounting for a significant share of the country's export earnings. He emphasized the importance of maximizing the potential of the SME industry, which directly and indirectly employs about 3 million Filipinos and contributes nearly 3/5 of the country's total exports. He also backed initiatives to move the industry up the value chain, including expansion in integrated circuit design and advanced packaging, with the long-term goal of establishing wafer fabrication capability in the Philippines. To support these goals, the government is pushing for the establishment of at least 3 specialized national laboratories that will serve as central hubs for research, innovation, and talent development in partnership with the academe and industry stakeholders. Recto said the progress of the industry roadmap will be closely monitored, with timelines, defined responsibilities, and coordinated action across agencies. Recto stressed the need to maximize the incentives under the Create More law, including income tax holidays, duty exemptions, and enhanced deductions available to qualified firms. He also emphasized the importance of addressing operational bottlenecks through improved coordination, faster processing, and more efficient systems. Recto said that the CAIA, created through Administrative Order 31 issued in 2025, gathers government and industry leaders to map out the growth, development, and global competitiveness of the sector. He said the council is tasked to deliver concrete results, describing it as a problem-solving council with an economic mission rather than a mere discussion forum.
Dateline Malacañang.
And that is all for today's Dateline Malacañang for Radyo Pilipinas World Service. This has been Bea Gaza-de Guzman.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila. Dateline Malacañang.